Hello, and welcome to an unofficial guide to Shifted Lands. Shifted Lands is a chapter or club-based LARP with two chapters. One is in Indiana and the other is in Michigan. Shifted Lands is defined by being a high fantasy boffer LARP that focuses around the fantasy world of Eldratha. The game has been running for over 25 years and is one of the longest running LARPs in the area. A typical Shifted Land event begins Friday afternoon and lasts until late Saturday night, with the objective to provide a 24-hour in-game experience for its players. This includes sleeping in on-site cabins, provided meals, and a welcoming community and a unique game culture. My name is Solomon. For clarity, I am not officially associated with any of the teams that run Shifted Lands, and I do not speak for all the people involved in the community, only myself. I am a mildly experienced player, having been a member since 2016, which puts me at around 6 to 7-ish years of participating at Shifted Lands. There are lots of people who still actively participate that have well over 2 decades of playing this game, so I'm definitely not the be-all end-all of information on the topic regarding this LARP. I am merely excited to share and express how awesome this game can be, and help people who are interested in LARPing. With introductions out of the way, let us begin talking about Shifted Lands. This is the main website, shiftedlands.com. Uh, Here you can find new player resources, the dedicated forums, contact information, and the rulebook. This video series is going to mainly focus on the rulebook of Shifted Lands, as there are a lot of helpful guides on YouTube in terms of generic going to your first LARP advice. Those videos cover topics like bringing a toothbrush, what to pack for your first game, costuming, what you might expect in a typical day, etc. The stated goal of this series is instead to educate you on the specifics of the Shifted Lands rulebook and a walkthrough of creating your character, developing a vision for character development, and providing helpful insight into how this LARP plays out in a typical event. So let's click on the rulebook and dive right into it. The first thing you'll see is this welcome text. It essentially covers, hey, we are a PG-13 game. You have to be a minimum of 13 or older to play. It also provides some context to what a LARP is. I'm going to assume that if you're watching this video, you understand the concept of what LARPing is and you have a rough idea of what a boffer LARP looks like. If you don't, I highly recommend just searching YouTube for LARP, L-A-R-P. You will find hundreds of results. Alrighty, so now we'll move into Eldratha. Eldratha. This is the given lore for the world of Eldratha. Within Eldratha is this island called Meridian, and on Meridian there are two towns named Sentinel, which is the Michigan chapter, and Stormwatch, which is the Indiana chapter. Now there are a ton more locations on Meridian and plenty of other towns. However, these are the primary focus and the location of where you'll spend most of your time playing in the LARP. These are both well-known adventuring towns, and typically there will be plot hooks and posted adventures for you to participate and interact within these towns. Whether it's a gang of goblins stole my child, or zombies are rising from the local cemetery, there is adventure to be had. Also, NPCs will walk around and talk to people, or might stumble into town with information on a particular MacGuffin. There will be plenty of other players around to roleplay with, and if you're ever looking for help on any given subject, 99% of the time, any player will be more than willing to provide you with information, or teach you how a skill works, or explain the current problems that town is facing, etc. So this is the brief history of Eldratha. This page covers a bullet point timeline sort of list to the history of the world. We're going to skip past this because there would be a lot to explain, and it's not really within the realm of the need to know for starting your character. However, this would be a good time to explain how your character is introduced to the world. Essentially, you were some person in a completely different universe, and you poofed into ours through what Shifted Land calls the Mist. So the biggest thing when it comes to the Mist is that it is a multi-purpose tool for the suspension of disbelief within Shifted Lands. So essentially, Your character fundamentally accepts that this thing called the mist influences and affects the world that your character resides in. This is the one, and I don't really want to use this word here, but I can't really think of a better term. This is the one gimmick that allows our plot marshals, the team that runs the game, to coexist and explain a lot of how things work within the world of Aldratha. Additionally, the mist is also kind of a pseudo location within the world, and it is what facilitates interplanar travel, as there are additional planes that kind of float around the world of Aldratha, planes like the elemental planes, such as fire, lightning, ice, earth, as well as a bunch of additional planes that I'm not going to get into here. But if you've delved into any kind of fantasy world, you'll find a lot of similar concepts. A very shorthand explanation of the mist that a lot of people like to use to communicate a very simple understanding of it is that it's very similar to the Nether in Minecraft. So if you've played Minecraft, you'll understand that there's this kind of pseudo world underneath the main one where you travel 8 times faster than you could in the main world. So this understanding does not encapsulate 90% of what the mist even is, but that's a barely working understanding of it, and we don't need to go deeper than that for the purpose of this video. All you need to know is that your character was poofed out from the mist from whatever world they previously inhabited, and they don't know why, and they're poofed into existence somewhere near one of the two main towns. This is how your character first enters the world of Aldratha. So now that that's out of the way, let's cover a few quick things that you'll need to know about policies within the game. Uh, so this whole rulebook is covered by this umbrella concept called the spirit of the rules, which basically boils down to don't cheat and don't purposely misuse things for what they are not intended for. Whether that's exploiting worded loopholes within the rulebook or finding a way to twist a skill to benefit your character, just don't be a jerk. We're all here to play with the same rules, and after 25-ish years of this game running, you're going to have really hard luck finding something that somebody hasn't already tried to do. We have a super cool Discord, which you can access from the main website, which has this rules Q&A section where you can openly find answers to a lot of your questions. You could just type in there and somebody will answer it. And also we have lots of discussions on how wordings and certain skills should be understood and used within the game. And we have plot marshals that regularly converse with the whole player base. So if you have a niche question or you want to really know how something works, I highly recommend going to the Discord. The Discord is where the vast majority of the community exists and interacts with each other outside of the actual LARP itself. Moving on, safety and conduct. So I'm going to read this word for word here. The most important rule of Shifted Lands is respect. Remain respectful of other players, NPCs, marshals, and the site. Please note that this doesn't include your character disrespecting another character as in-game roleplay. However, in such roleplay cases, you must be mindful of the comfort system. So, the comfort system is a way for players to feel safe during intense roleplay and combat situations. Essentially, you say comfort check while giving that person a thumbs up, and if the player responds with a thumbs down, this roleplay situation needs to come to an immediate end, whether that's a conversation stopping or physically allowing the player the space to get up and leave, like they were trapped in a corner or something. The last thing we want is for someone to be stuck in a situation that could impact their mental state, their mental health, or distress them outside of the role-playing world. Another important system to know is the hold system. This is very common in a lot of LARPs, and it's basically a staple of the LARPing genre in general. But basically, somebody shouts hold, and the immediate game world comes to a pause, as if somebody had clicked a pause on a TV. If you hear hold, you should also yell hold, and then stop whatever you're doing and stay put exactly where you were. Holds are called for a multitude of reasons, but the main and most important one is player safety. Somebody sprains their ankle, trips and falls, or they take a nasty whack to the head or something, there needs to be a hold called to make sure that that player is safe and okay. That part of it is pretty cut and dry. Other holds are called for kind of plot reasons, and a plot marshal will announce something within the world that is like probably really cool, or it affects a huge number of players. Like this whole area is consumed by, X shadow, so now shadow stuff does things, right? Like there's you're in a damp cave, so now fire stuff doesn't work very well. There's lots of reasons why plot marshals will call holds to express um, how the world is interacting with you. Um, the rest of these policies are pretty standard stuff. Please take the time to read them in regards to like the smoking and the harassment and medical forums and stuff. We're gonna skip past these, but you should definitely take the time to read these when you go through the rulebook. Like these are all very important to know. So let's talk about combat within Shifted Lands. One of the things that I feel that I need to get across is that this is a boffer LARP. If you come to play, there's a pretty good chance that you're going to get whacked by a foam bat of some kind. However, we do have a system in place for people who specifically do not want to enter combat or get hit by anything. This is called the page system. A page is essentially somebody who cannot or will not participate in combat. These can vary from individuals with like personal injuries, somebody who just wanted to be a crafter, somebody with a medical condition, or somebody who just doesn't want to get whacked by a foam bat. Um, they all of their stuff and their skills outside of combat work just the same. They have to wear a band on their head that says "I'm a page," a yellow headband with "I'm a page" on it. Uh, and they cannot enter combat basically. The way that a combatant interacts with a page is as if they were going to hit, they just assume that they hit them every time, basically. So if you're playing a page, your character is fundamentally very weak to a combat situation. So when you're playing a page and you don't want to, you don't want to get whacked, it's a really good idea to not be in the same room as where a combat is going down. Obviously, because your character can die very easily while they're a page. And this is mostly just for a lot of people, like, a game before they fell and they sprained their ankle and they aren't quite recovered. Um, at one point, there were children pages, and we're like, you don't want to whack a kid in the head or something like that. So they got to play as pages, but some of the rules have been changed. And right now we're a 13 and up game, and I think 13-year-olds can engage in combat, as far as I'm aware. Um, but the page system is kind of this niche system for people who don't want to get hurt or don't want to interact with buffer, um, and that's totally okay. To each their own. Of the vast majority of players are not pages though, so I just wanted to cover this real quick because if you're watching this and you're like thinking like, oh well, I really don't want to enter combat, paging is perfectly valid. It is a perfectly valid way to play the game. Okay, so this section of the rulebook is a lot of additional information uh, about stuff that I'm going to skip. I've explained this already, but it's got sections about what you might want to bring to your first LARP event. Again, you can go look at some other YouTube videos for that kind of content. What's important for us to discuss at some point is underneath the bonuses tab. There's a system called stuff points that we really don't need to interact with here until maybe your second game. And we can come back to this we're going to come back to this either later in the video or in a different video. Another and more important section that we got to cover is called logistics. So your first stop after arriving at the event site should be logistics. Sometimes this is a specific cabin. Sometimes it's the back of a truck. Sometimes it's a particular table somewhere. This is where you will check into the event. Pay money for the event, get your character sheet printed out, accomplish all the additional tasks like things that require upkeep. If this is your first event, this is where you will be officially creating your character for realsies. This is also where you get item tags to prove that you have certain items with you. So if you have a sword, you need to have a printed and signed tag that says, I have a sword. Logistics is where all of that goes down, and it needs to be the first thing you do after you arrive on the event site. This section also covers weapon construction and wearing armor and the rules for that kind of crafting content. People who really want to like make their own stuff. Um, Personally, I would really recommend, as somebody who's like tried to make their own stuff, I would recommend that you borrow weapons for the first time when you first come to game from Monster Camp. Um, Monster Camp is a topic that we should probably cover real quick. It's essentially a room with a bunch of makeup, costuming, weapons, and a bunch of other stuff. And it's where the plot marshals, or in another sense, the dungeon masters of the game, operate out of. This is where the willing NPC volunteers are going to spend their time costuming, applying makeup, swapping weapons, and getting directions from plot marshals of what they should be doing as like NPCs in the world. An important note to make here is that it is completely free to NPC at any point in time. You can walk into Monster Camp and you say, "Hey, I want an NPC," and they will be like, "Yes, please NPC for us." It is awesome when you NPC for the game, and it is completely free. That means that if you want to spend the weekend NPCing, you will sleep in a cabin, get, I think it's like 4 meals, because there's a meal Friday night and then there's breakfast, lunch, dinner on Saturday night, Saturday, for free. So you go to the woods, you go hang out in a cabin, and you whack people with bats, and you get to eat for free, and you get to have a great freaking time, man. Dude, NPCing is awesome, and I've personally spent entire games just exclusively NPCing, and there's really good rewards for NPCing. It's so helpful to the game when you NPC, um, and your character can really get a lot of benefits out of it. I would go as far as to say that like you could NPC the first game you show up, and like you would have a blast, and your character would be, you would be far more better off um, in understanding what you actually want to do with your character if you NPC your whole first game. Like it's a really valid way to go about going to your first game, because everything's free. I'm pretty sure your first game is already free as a player, because obviously we want you guys to like enjoy and get hooked on the game. So I think a good way to kind of wrap up the first section of this rulebook, kind of the 101, is by talking about our in-game, out-of-game system, which is underneath the first section of the first game. I'm going to read this part word for word again because this is a very excellent summary of kind of how the game works. The phrase in-game is used to refer to anything that is assumed for our purposes to actually occur and or exist within the fantasy realm of Shifted Lands. From the moment you step out of the woods and onto the trail leading into town, you are considered in-game and should remain in character at all times. Staying as in-game as possible is very important to the roleplay of the world. Out of the game, or OOG, refers to anything that is assumed to not exist in that context of the world, even if it does exist in the real world. A white headband, very important, a white headband is used to signify that a person is out of game. Anyone with a white headband on is completely out of game, not able to be seen or heard by those who are in-game, and not be able to touch in-game items without permission. Out-of-game conversations should not be held around other players or in the common player areas, such as the tavern. So if you've got a buddy that you really like talking about cars with, you shouldn't talk about cars in the middle of the tavern where a bunch of players are playing. It is very distracting if someone is talking about the new. Oh, they use the car example. It is very distracting if someone is talking about the new car they bought recently. In a fantasy genre, there's no such thing. We call them wagons for short. People be like, "Oh, you got a new wagon," right? Like they'll infer in a way. If you must leave the game during the middle of an event, leave the immediate area of play, out of sight of others if possible, and ask the question, "Does anybody mind if I leave game?" loudly, and you do it twice. Um, any in-game PC or NPC, regardless of their condition, if they may reply with yes. If no one replies, place a white headband on to signify you are out of game as you leave the game on a 3 count. I walk into the woods 1, I walk into the woods 2, I walk into the woods 3. A lot of stuff that you will do in game is like on a 3 count. Something like I pick you up 1, I pick you up 2, I pick you up 3 to like carry a body, or um, I slash this open 1, I slash this open 2, I slash this open 3 to like cut down a spider web, etc. Right? A lot of stuff is done on a 3 count, and how you enter game is the same way as you exit game. You say, "Does anybody mind if I enter game? Does anybody mind if I enter game?" Because what you really don't want to encounter is like you're walking around in the woods and some guy just poofs out of nowhere and starts attacking you. That would suck. All out of game people are to avoid hanging around in any in-game areas and to avoid conversing with in-game players as much as possible. This is being done to better keep the flow of the game for those who wish to remain in-game. Using out-of-game knowledge for in-game benefit is known as metagaming, and it is cheating. So if I know Billy Bob Joe has, if me Solomon knows that Billy Bob Joe has a really cool item, but my character doesn't know that he has this really cool item, I cannot act on that information as my character. That would be cheating because that is not something that my character would know. Right? It's very simple understanding of it, and it goes back to the spirit of the rules. So that is the Shifted Lands 101. We got through a bunch of the rulebook, and 102 is going to be about the meat and potatoes of what you actually probably wanted to watch this video for, which is like making your character, what all the races are, what type of skills should I be buying, what should I be looking into for developing my character, etc. I won't be covering combat because the form of this video is a screencast of a website, so I cannot quite show you the body mechanics of anatomy of a swing, and like all this complicated crap about like how you make a swing or how you make an attack or what you gotta say or all this other crap. I won't really be covering combat. um, when I cover skills, and particularly combat skills, I'll be like, yeah, this one's really good, or this one's really bad. Um, and I'll kind of express I'll give you context about it. However, I will not be covering like directly combat. We have combat marshals that when you enter your first game, you will have, before you enter game, you will interact with a combat marshal, and the combat marshal will run you through 5 minutes really quick of like, hey, this is how this works. This is how you should be swinging your sword. This is how you should be casting spells, etc., etc. We have a whole marshalship team that is dedicated to introducing you to combat and like how everything works. So I'm not going to cover that, but I will give you my opinions on what skills I think are really cool and really good. So thank you for your time. This has been Shifted Lands 101.